Nice to see you. So we're recording the session today. You'll see that notification just came in. So I want to start off and say thanks for joining us for the 2024 QULOC University Librarians Forum. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nicole Clark. I'm the University Librarian at QUT, and I've had the pleasure of being the QULOC convener for the last 12 months, and my pronouns are she, her. So I want to start off firstly by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands where we are meeting. So I'm in Brisbane, Meanjin, and so I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and the Yagara people as the First Nations owners of these lands, and pay respects to elders, laws, customs and creation spirits, and acknowledge that these have always been Aboriginal lands. They're unceded lands, and they've always been places of coming together like we are today, sharing knowledge, connecting as a community, and I pay respects to that long tradition. I also acknowledge that we're coming from multiple places across 3 states today, and so I'd also like to pay respects to the traditional owners of the lands where you are, where we all are, and I'd encourage you to do the same in the chat, and you can see that people are doing that now. And I'd also like to acknowledge and pay my respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues here today, and acknowledge the really important work that you're all doing to make libraries more inclusive, safer and better places. So thank you to you. So we might move to the next slide. So it's wonderful to have you here for the first event of 2024, and I think we have just over 200 registrations, which is fantastic. And we're coming from across Queensland, Northern Territory and New South Wales, which is fantastic. So welcome everyone. So today's program is in 2 parts. So the first part, we're going to hear about some of the great things that have been happening over the last 12 months and some of the plans for 2024. So I'm going to give a very brief recap of some of the things that the University Librarians Committee has been doing. And we'll also hear from some of the members of the communities of practice and the practitioner groups about their activities and their plans. And we had really clear feedback from the last session that we ran that you enjoyed hearing from your colleagues in the group. So we've taken the opportunity to do that again. And I'd like to thank in advance our speakers. So thank you to Leslie, Susie, Jenny and Jay Shree for reporting back here from your groups today. We might move to the next slide, please. And you will have heard about the fairly new Association of Neurodivergent and Disabled Glamour Professionals of Australia, so ANPA, which has been led by 2 of our QULOC colleagues. And we'll hear more from one of their co-founders and co-chairs, Emilia, today. And then Claire Thorpe, the Director of Library Services, Southern Cross University, will take us through a fun activity to move us into the next part of the program, which will be a chance to hear more from university librarians. So again, feedback from the last session was that you enjoyed hearing from the university librarians and you really wanted to hear more about their views, especially around values, around their values and their commitment to creating better, fairer and more equitable and diverse workplaces and libraries. And so we'll hear more from our group of ULs about their personal experiences and their reflections on values-based leadership. And thank you to Claire, Maureen, Anita, Carmel and Carlo for sharing with us today. And lastly, Janet Fletcher, the Director of Libraries at the Australian Catholic University, will wrap up and close for us. Throughout the session, there's going to be time for questions, so feel free to ask your questions in the chat function as well. So you can see, I'm just looking at the chat as well, so that's nice to see the conversation happening there. It's a jam-packed morning with an excellent lineup of speakers, and I'd like to just again thank our speakers, because without them, this forum is impossible. So the session runs till 12, so 2 hours is a long time to be sitting down at your desk, so feel free to get up, move around, grab a cup of tea, whatever you need to do. We're recording the session, so if you miss anything, it will also be up at the QULOC website later on. And just a quick word to our speakers. So Michael Hawkes and Danielle Lang from QUT are the fantastic people behind the scenes, and thank you to both of them for doing all the tech wizardry for us. So throughout your presentation, when you need to change your slides, just do what I'm doing and just ask them to change the slide for you. Okay, so we move to the next slide, please. Start talking. Just so I'm going to, if we can just move on one more slide, I'm not sure I'm not saying it. I'll start talking anyway. There we go. Excellent. Oh, hang on, I've moved too far. I've given the game away. Let's go back. 2023 recap, that was my fault. What can you say? So what I'm doing is giving you a quick recap of what happened in 2023. The ULs had 4 meetings throughout the year, and that was a great chance to catch up. We met mostly through Zoom, but we also had a really nice chance to catch up at Griffith, at the Gold Coast campus, and also at the QULOC University Librarians Breakfast, which was great. So our biggest focus last year, as most of you all know, was on that transition to the new model. So moving to the new way of working as groups, so to the communities of practice and the practitioner groups, and you'll hear more from those groups today. So a lot of our work last year was around liaising and consulting with groups, working through the logistics of that change, and a whole lot of working through procedure and documentation and website changes. So that's all in place now, and that'll continue on this year, and we look forward to seeing that continue and encourage you to get involved in the communities of practice, because the idea is that they're open and they're there for everyone. You'll hear the conveners speak about that as well. And so we also, generative AI was a big focus for us, and we held a special meeting to discuss generative AI and the opportunities and the challenges for our libraries. And many of the group conveners I know also had generative AI as one of their key themes, and reported back to the ULs on that. Inclusion and diversity and leadership practice was a priority discussion topic throughout 2023 meetings, and we're continuing to progress work and discussion in this area. You'll hear more on that from a personal level from some of the ULs later on. We welcomed back to QULOC our friends at Charles Sturt University, and it's great to be working more closely with Carlo and his team. So welcome to all colleagues from Charles Sturt today. And I had the pleasure of attending the Indigenous Strategy Community Practice Members Forum in September on behalf of the UL's committee. And many thanks to the group for hosting it. And I know that we're going to hear more back from Leslie about that fantastic initiative as well. And lastly, many of the ULs attended a special meeting of the Workforce and Organisational Development Practitioner Group dedicated to the new ALIA Professional Pathways program. And again, I'd like to thank the group for organising the event, and I'll leave it to Jen to tell us more about that a little later on. So we're going to move to the next slide in a minute, but before we do, I just want to thank Michael Hawkes, who has, I know Michael will be loving me doing this, so he won't be. He's very expertly and calmly worked voluntarily behind the scenes as the QULOC Executive Officer for the last little over 12 months to make sure that all of our activities, including today, ran smoothly. So wonderful thanks to Michael for his work in 2023. So we'll move to the next slide, which I've already blown, so I'm no good at suspense. So I'd like to introduce and welcome the new QULOC convener and team for 2024. And so Blanca Pisani, who's at the University of the Sunshine Coast now, but formerly at UNE, will be taking on the role as convener. And thank you very much to Blanca. And also joining and assisting Blanca will be Janet Fletcher, from Australian Catholic University and as the deputy, and Dan Clarabelle as well from ACU will be acting in the voluntary role of the executive officer. So many thanks to Blanca, Janet, and Dan, and looking forward to working with you in 2024. And Blanca can't be with us today, but Janet, I might just pass to you quickly if you're online, just if you would like to say anything, a few words.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm looking forward to this year. I'm certainly looking forward to this morning's session, and it'll be great when Blanca is at the University of Sunshine Coast. So I look forward to sort of assisting her, and I'm very grateful for Dan to take over from the great work that Michael's done. I mean, that support is invaluable. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks, Dan. Oh, great. So, well, we'll move on now to the main section. We've got two main sections of our session this morning. So I'm going to move on to the section where we're talking to some of the QULOC groups. So we'll hear a little bit more from some of our conveners. We weren't able to have all of our conveners speak, but we've got some of our conveners speaking, and they'll be speaking for around 5 to 8 minutes and telling us a bit more about what their group has done in 2023 and what they're thinking about for 2024. So again, if you have questions, put them in the chat function, and we'll have time to answer them at the end of the session. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker today, and so I'd like to introduce Leslie Akers. So Leslie is the Senior Manager, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Services and Collections at the University of Queensland, and Leslie will be reporting back on the Indigenous Strategy Community of Practice. So over to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Nicole. Michael, I'll get you to load my slides up, please. Thank you. Okay, before I begin, I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land of where I'm calling from today, which are Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are online today and acknowledge their countries and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Yeah, I'm Leslie Akers. I'm a Bidjara Kari woman and also a descendant of the Budagal people from Bardu Island in the Torres Straits, and I'm working at UQ in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Services and Collections team. Next slide, Michael. So just to give a brief overview of the group, this is a list of our members, and Caroline Williams, the University Librarian at UQ, is our mentor. Next slide, Michael. In 2023, we had our first face-to-face meeting at Bond University, which Tiffany Mitchell, faculty librarian from the Bond Business School, kindly hosted us. And we also, as Nicole mentioned, UQ hosted an Indigenous Strategy of Community of Practice Forum at UQ in September last year. That was well attended, and over the 2 days, we gave participants the opportunity to visit Fryer Library and see some of the special collections, as well as a tour of the art museum. But also on the second day, we had an opportunity to participate in yarning circles, which were sharing the responses to the impact of colonialism represented in library collections. We also had presenters who spoke about UQ's Indigenising Curriculum project and shared progress and projects from our QULOC member universities, and an overview of the work of the team that I manage at UQ. We also undertook a culturally unsafe titles audit. So members from our libraries actually shared resources which they identified as culturally sensitive, and staff undertook their own audits to review any culturally unsafe content and updated metadata and applied cultural advice statements where required. So that was a very important project which really enhanced the knowledge and understanding of the importance of respecting Indigenous knowledges and resources in our libraries. With Mia Strazik-Barker currently on leave, Marjorie Jeffers from the University of Southern Queensland is our co-convenor. Next slide, Michael. Just a couple of photos from 2023. So on the left, we have our meeting at Bond University and also a group photo of participants who attended the forum at UQ in September. Next slide, please, Michael. So in 2024, we're continuing with practical improvements for our collections and metadata as part of knowledge sharing. Also, as our group transitions to a community of practice model, we are focusing on sharing best practices, knowledges, and experiences to ensure the representation and adaptation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, cultures, histories, and knowledges are respected, valued, and appreciated. This is so we can build meaningful and sustainable partnerships in libraries. So we continue to use the Yarning Circle as a basis for all our meetings and dialogue and include presentations. So we're constantly sharing knowledge, best practices, and information. And this year we would like to identify a collaborative project. Next slide, please, Michael. Now, the community of practice is open to all staff. So if you would like to get involved, please contact Marjorie or your local member currently in your library because it is a safe space to learn, network, and share information, which is vital in achieving the work in this space. So thank you, Nicole, for the opportunity to speak. And I'm happy to take any questions later on in the session. Thank you.
Leslie, and yes, and just a reminder that if you do have questions, you can put them in the chat function and we'll be able to speak about them at the end of the session. Okay, so I'd like to now welcome our next speaker. So Susie Bailey, who's the Coordinator Digital Library Services at Griffith University, and Susie will report back on the Library Technologies Community Practice. So over to you, Susie.
Thanks, Nicole. As Nicole said, I'm Coordinator Digital Library at Griffith University, and I've been the convener of this group for the last 2 years. Next slide, please. So we've been busy. We've sort of been operating as a community of practice for a couple of years now, really. So we welcomed 9 new members this year. So it's getting to be quite a big group. As Leslie said, if you would like to join or you have interest in joining, please email the QULOC Executive Officer. Our meetings, we meet 4 times a year and they're quite informal. We tend to have a sort of a institution roundtable where we talk about the different technology things that have been happening at our institution and share issues, troubleshoot, and you know, have a shoulder to lean on when things are going horribly wrong with your network. It's a good outlet. What's in a name? We changed our name officially as part of the transition to the community of practice. So we used to be called the ICT Group and now we are Library Technologies. And in 2023, we do this every year, but we collected some data. So we conducted the QULOC Library Technology and Use Survey. That asks a lot of questions about all the different types of technology you use. So for example, if you're doing a repository DSpace upgrade and you want to know which institutions also have DSpace or which institutions have also done an upgrade, you can have a look at the survey results and see who else has got DSpace 7, or you might be interested to know who's integrating with symplectic elements, all those sorts of things. You can find institutions who have similar systems to you and find out, have a chat about any integration problems or what they might be planning to do next year differently. So if you want to get access to those results from the survey, it is on the CUL website. You need to be a CUL member. If you don't have access, you can just email CUL and they will set you up if you belong to a member institution, which everybody most likely does. Next slide, please. And so in 2024, we're looking to focus on some product roadshows focused around database and resource discovery. So a number of institutions have been upgrading their LibGuides A to Z database interface, and some institutions have been transitioning away from LibGuides towards the Primo databases. And a couple of institutions have implemented something new and funky, or will do soon, which is called LibKey Nomad++. So we'll just be getting some demos of those to see how they work. A lot of institutions are also moving towards Open Athens, and so we're having discussions around project implementation and how that was managed, resourcing for those projects, issues that might have cropped up during implementation, and decisions and risks and why things were made. A couple of institutions are also using EasyProxy analytics, so we'll have a demonstration of the business rationale for that, the project overview, what's involved, and what you can get out of it. And similarly, service management, a number of institutions are moving towards enterprise service management solutions, including ServiceNow and Salesforce. So we're just looking at how the different institutions have found that process. We're not usually responsible for implementing it or making the decisions, but we've all got different configurations, and it's just interesting to see what decisions that people have made and how it's working and not working at the different institutions. I know a lot of people have been talking about generative AI, and particularly in the learning and teaching space. So our group is particularly more focused on how we might use that in an operational context. So if you're working in the IT sort of area, it can be really useful for assisting with writing some Python code or doing some CSS. At Griffith, we've used it to ask it some test cases, for example. If we're upgrading a system, can you give us some test cases? So we've been experimenting with how we might use that more practically in the IT space, and we'd like to dedicate a meeting towards talking about that. And that's it from me. Any questions?
Well, thanks for that, Susie. We're just looking, so we'll take questions in the chat and we'll come back to that at the end. So yeah, thank you very much for that update. So we'll move on next to our next speaker, Jen Thomas, who's the Head of Library and Academic Engagement Services at Griffith University as well, who will report back on the Workforce and Organisational Development Practitioner Group. So thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Nicole. Excuse me. So yeah, thanks everyone. Hello, and I'm here to talk about the work of the WAD. I'm currently at the Gold Coast campus, so hello from these beautiful Yuggum Bay, Comber Marylands. So I am the convener of the WAD and have been for the last 2 years. I'd also just like to give a shout out to Anna Duchesne from Charles Sturt, who was our deputy convener, and our UL mentor, Janet Fletcher. We look forward to working with Janet again in 2024. So the WAD, for those of you who are wondering, is the Workforce and Organisational Development Practitioner Group. It's just easier to say WAD. So if you don't mind, I'll stick with WAD, but I am talking about, excuse me, workforce and organisational development issues with this group. Could I have the next slide, please? So these are our terms of reference. we have a really great group. We meet 4 times a year to discuss the emerging issues and trends relating to academic library workforce and how we can improve the overall health of our libraries by analysing things like staffing, structures, culture, processes and procedures so that we can continually improve. So we maintain a Padlet of discussion topics and themes for us to explore each year. Last year, topics of interest as they relate to academic libraries included things like career mobility, psychosocial safety, secondments, induction and onboarding processes, restructures and change processes, and then the ALIA Professional Pathways project, which Nicole mentioned earlier. So we can't cover everything, but we do what we can. We keep an informal tone and all of our members are encouraged to contribute and participate, and they do. It's a really great group. So we often theme our meetings according to a hot topic, and where possible, we do open the meeting up to interested folks across all of the QULOC libraries. So, and the nature of our conversations means that the WAD has a potential relationship with every other QULOC community of practice or practitioner group, and we gladly seek opportunities to collaborate on topics and initiatives of shared interest. We regularly do institutional roundtable updates. We really value the power of that sharing because over the last few years, many of us have experienced disasters or crises that we can learn from. There's always a lot to talk about. While we do take a few notes, we do employ the Chatham House rules, and that's one of the reasons we stayed as a practitioner group rather than a community of practice, so that we could keep that freedom of sharing. Next slide, please, Michael. Thank you. So we did some really great things last year, the most notable being the Indigenous Voice and Representation webinar series with Dr. Kirsten Thorpe. So this was actually part of the ALIA QULOC mentoring scheme, which the WAD also helps to steward. So with the grateful endorsement and financial support of the UL's group, the WAD and ALIA, we coordinated these 2 webinars, which were then opened up to all QULOC members, not just those members of the mentoring scheme, given the importance of the content. And so these webinars, along with the reference lists, were recorded and made available to all QULOC members to use as valuable resources. And I'll share the links to these in the chat after I've spoken. Attendance at the webinars was extremely high. There was over 120 participants at each, and it got some really great feedback. So I'd also like to thank again the ULOC group for supporting these webinars, and thanks to everyone for attending and making them so successful. So in addition to the mentoring scheme, the WAD also coordinated our September meeting, which was a themed meeting on psychosocial hazards and safety at work. And that coincided with the release of the Code of Practice, and there was lots of discussion at that time. And then at our December meeting, we were joined by some special guests. Nicole mentioned this earlier. Trish Hepworth from ALIA, who took us through the newly released ALIA Professional Pathways Framework. Many of you were likely involved in the consultation rounds for that. And it was great to get an understanding of the framework and its significance in shaping and recognising the multiple pathways into our industry. And we were also joined by members of the UL group, with specific thanks to Nicole, because Nicole led us through an activity about the challenges of tackling change and building staff capability in times of flux. So just one thing that has stuck with all of us who are there. So many of us know about a VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. But Nicole introduced us to a BANI world, B-A-N-I, which is a world that is brittle, anxious, non-linear and incomprehensible. So as negative as that might sound, it was actually a really energising and engaging way to wrap up the year. So we were really thrilled to end on that note. And thanks again to Nicole and to Trish for being special guests. So looking forward to 2024, well, nothing's locked in yet. We do have our first meeting in March and we'll start discussing our themes for the year, but there are already some ideas in play, including, and we have heard about AI. So we will also be looking at AI, but perhaps more specifically at skills development of our staff. But Susie, perhaps our groups can join forces, because we might also be looking at how we can incorporate AI into local processes. So that's a win and already a point for collaboration. We'll talk, Susie. And we will be partnering, I don't know if I should, Stephanie will probably be mentioning this too, but we're planning to partner with the research support group for a showcase of the various research support models that we use at our libraries. And we'll also continue to help facilitate the ALIA QULOC mentoring scheme. So this means more QULOC specific webinars. So we'll work with the ULs group on that, and hopefully they'll be as successful as they were last year. I'm also really happy to be contacted with any questions that you have about the WOD, and to take any questions after the session. But yeah, that's all from me. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks, Jen. And I'll just mention about Barney that Jen came up with the fantastic idea of, even though it does sound negative, Jen reimagined it as Barney the purple dinosaur that many of us will know from our childhood, so made it much less.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, so next up, we've got Jayshree Mamtora. So Jayshree is the Manager Scholarly Communications at James Cook University, and Jayshree is going to take us through a report from the Research Support Practitioner Group. So thanks, Jayshree.
Thank you, Nicole, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land where I am speaking from in Townsville, Queensland, the Bindal people of the Birrikaba Nation and the Wulgurukaba people. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to First Nations peoples present here today. And yes, thank you, Nicole. I am presenting this quick report today as Deputy Convener of the Research Support Practitioner Group, as Stephanie Bradbury, the convener, is away. And in fact, she's on her way to Townsville, where I'm based, and I will be catching up with her this afternoon. So I'd like to first set the scene by describing our scope. Our members support Queensland University Libraries and other member libraries in regard to research support matters. And our terms of reference, so next slide please, Michael, are not that dissimilar to other QULOC practitioner groups and communities of practice. We monitor the environment for emerging issues and trends. We provide a forum for benchmarking and the exchange of information on good practices and strategies. We develop and present PD opportunities and communicate and collaborate with other QULOC groups on these, and we advise and make recommendations to the ULs. So the realm in which we do this is research support, and this includes things like support for researchers in publishing and sharing their research outputs. We look at library issues relating to research grants and ethic guidelines. We look at copyright and Creative Commons licensing, and our remit includes all things related to publication metrics and other ways to demonstrate the impact of research. And of course, training in all of these services for our research communities. During 2023, we had the pleasure of having two co-mentors, Janet Fletcher, Director of Libraries at Australian Catholic University, and Nicole Clark, University Librarian at QUT. They shared the role, alternating their attendance at meetings. And from 2024 on, as you know, Janet has taken on the role of Deputy Convener for the QULOC UL Committee and has stepped down from her mentor role with us, but Nicole will remain our group mentor, and we are very much looking forward to working with her. Next slide, please, Michael. So 2023 was a great year for us as the group was back on board full swing finally, and we transitioned from a working group to a practitioner group. We met 4 times during the course of last year, and we provided 4 professional development opportunities through presentations. So 2 of these were offered on the same day, and 3 were opened out to all members. Our first presentation was by Lalash Cherry, Office of the National Data Commissioner, who provided an overview of DataPlace, the Commonwealth Government's new data sharing platform, and the accreditation process for universities. So most QULOC universities are still progressing through this process, and while some have submitted their application, the details remain to be seen. We had 2 presentations at our October meeting, and the session was entitled The 3 R's of Scholarly Publishing. The speakers were Fiona Bradley from UNSW Library, who presented on rights retention and open access. And the second speaker was Arthur Smith from CALL, who presented a comprehensive overview of read and publish agreements. The final presentation of the year last year was 1 year of ChatGPT from future concept to daily reality, where we introduced a panel of experts from many fields to discuss how ChatGPT has and will continue to impact on some element of research and library research support. Videos from all the sessions except the DataPlace one are available on the QULOC YouTube channel. As with other QULOC groups, we embrace our meeting opportunities as a time to share. 2023 was no different, and members shared on professional development activities such as the annual Research Support Community Day, which many of us attended, ResBaz Queensland, the eResearch Australia Conference, and the IFLA Academic and Research Libraries Open Access Conference. We continued to provide brief institutional reports, as it was useful to hear about what other institutions are doing in the research space, and we set up a Padlet site where members could document their institutional highlights and challenges. Next slide, please, Michael. So, and I apologize for the slides being very busy, but we tried to pack in a lot onto the 2 slides that we were allowed. So in 2024, the group will continue to run as a practitioner group, and then we will transition to a community of practice in 2025, as recommended by the QULOC University Librarians. We have 4 professional development activities planned as per the slide. Our first speaker will be Professor Cameron Naylon from the Curtin University Open Knowledge Initiative, who will present on changing the world, one piece of open research information at a time, how you can help. And this will be, there will be an open invitation sent to all QULOC library members. In July, we will have Anthony O'Brien from the University of Newcastle, who will present on common misconceptions, myth-busting, Creative Commons licenses. And then in August, we are joining forces, as Jennifer mentioned, with the Workforce and Organizational Development Practitioner Group to present Next Top Models Staffing for Research Support in Libraries. We plan to showcase the diversity in staffing models that support library research activities and services. Finally, in November, we aim to present a session on, AI and the limitation and tools that are applicable in research. So yes, it continues to be a hot topic with the landscape moving very quickly, so we know that there will be much more to share. And we will continue with the 2 elements of our previous meeting format, which is the report backs from conferences and other PD activities. And we see great value in continuing to share cross-institutionally on the knowledge and information that comes out of conferences. And we will also continue with the institutional reports. So at the meetings, we present brief verbal reports, and then this content is supplemented by the dot points in the Padlet site that we've created. And as you'll see from the slide, there's a number of hot topics on the horizon for 2024. We will work from these ideas to refine and assemble our program for this year. So please stay tuned for our first event on the 12th of March at 11 a.m. AEST time, Professor Cameron Naylon, and I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Michael.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jayashree, and thanks to all of our presenters. Now I can see that we have a question from Bronwyn. So Bronwyn asked of Jayashree, will the presentations that you've been mentioning be recorded at all?
They certainly will.
Brilliant. Thank you. Now I'm just working off a very small screen, so I'm just checking if we have any more questions. Michael or Danielle, can you see any questions that I can't see? I'm going to take that as a no. I have a question to all of our presenters, and it occurred to me while you were talking that we really are lucky in QULOC. Like, we're such an active group, and we're not an anomaly, but we are for other states. Other states look at us and really appreciate the collegial sort of attitude and the collaborative work that we do. And so this is a thank you and also a question. So firstly, thank you to you and all of the conveners and all of the group members who make this such a vibrant space and such a sharing space. And also to my fellow university librarians, because we have a very similar collegial attitude that permeates what we do. And I know that I really appreciate it from one, we get a lot of work done. Two, I learn a lot of things. And three, I get to make connections with my peers and with other people from other institutions. So I'm just interested from each of you to just hear a little bit, just briefly about what you appreciate about the groups that you're involved in. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. So would anyone like to kick us off? And I can see people saying in the chat that QULOC's amazing, and it really is. So anyone want to kick us off with your thoughts?
Well, I can go because I really appreciated it yesterday because I got to email the listserv and ask if is anybody else having this problem. So we had been experiencing a large number of blocks from a particular publisher and thinking it was something to do with our setup, and I emailed the group and they were able to say, no, we're all having that problem too. So it's really just that ability to connect with your colleagues and feel less isolated. Other people are going through the same thing, and share your experiences and learn from those experiences, and yeah, knowing who you can ask when you're stuck.
Thanks for that.
And shall I just jump in there, Nicole?
Yep.
Similarly, I think it's the sharing aspect. When we kicked off the group again in 2022, we thought, oh, well, perhaps we won't ask for reports. Maybe they're too onerous. However, on hindsight, we decided that even a brief report would help us share with others to discover what others are doing, to be able to follow up and also to share with some of the work that we are doing as well. So, that sharing and learning from each other is a big component.
Thanks, Jayashree.
Nicole, yep, I will, only being new to academic libraries and my second year at UQ, I have found the QULOC group that I'm a member of absolutely amazing in the fact that the willing to be vulnerable in our meetings and to be able to feel that safe and share experiences and knowledges and issues, challenges, to be able to have that space is important, particularly with the work that we're all trying to achieve in these institutions. And I can't stress how important it is to meet face-to-face, because from my personal observations, the two face-to-face experiences that we had last year was so beneficial, and the opportunity to network in these forums face-to-face is invaluable. I know that, you know, we have distance and limitations to funding, but I think that's a really important focus for QULOC, is to look at providing or advocating or seeking funding for face-to-face meetings, because learning from each other is so important, and to be able to share those experiences and challenges is just so invaluable when you're doing it in person. So I really appreciate the opportunity to even host our group last year, and made some wonderful connections.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, I agree. Face-to-face is a really important opportunity. Susie, I can see you've got your hand up.
I just wanted to add to what Leslie said, because in addition to being the convener for the Library Technologies Group, I've also participated in the Indigenous Strategy COP this year as well. And so I'm quite a seasoned member of the ICT group, but in the Indigenous Strategy one, I've really just been sitting quietly and listening. And it's just been really useful just as a forum to learn, as Leslie said, from what everyone else is doing, and inspire you to get ideas of things to do. Yeah.
And Jen, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I agree with everything everybody's just said, but also for me personally, I really value hearing the perspectives from our regional colleagues, because my experience in academic libraries is wholly metropolitan, and I think a lot of, you know, I've got a very Brisbane-centric group of colleagues and buddies, so it's really great to hear from our regional colleagues, you know, where the universities are perhaps smaller and have less staff. So hearing about how they put things in place and continue to work smart is something that I am always learning from. So I really appreciate that aspect of it as well.
Thanks, Jen. I'm just looking in the chat. So we had a question from Adrian, who asked, will the PD sessions for the research support group be open to QULOC members only? And Jayshree's answered that question in the chat, so saying that we plan to open them out to all members and we'll put them open for them. So thanks, Joshua. Well, I think that all that remains then, and I can see some lovely comments in the chat about the value of QULOC, and also what people gain from it, and the value of face-to-face meetings, and Ellen and extreme Leslie and the other speakers. So all that remains is for me to ask you to please thank our speakers, Leslie, Susie, Jenny and Jayshree, for a fantastic presentation and conversation. So I'll ask you to do so in the usual way in the emojis on the function or in the chat. So thank you all. Okay, so brings me to the next speaker in our lineup this morning. So I'd like to welcome Emilia Bell. So Emilia, along with their University of Southern Queensland colleague Nikki Anderson, is the co-chair and co-founder of the Association of Neurodivergent and Disabled Glamour Professionals Australia. And Emilia is going to tell us more about the association. So over to you, Emily. I can see you on. So thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. So AMPA, which is the Association of Neurodivergent and Disabled Glamour Professionals Australia, was founded late last year as an organisation focused on disability and neurodiversity inclusion in glamour professions, including, of course, libraries. If we could just go to the next slide, thanks. Wonderful. And we're led by values of community, pride, belonging, and leadership. And we have some more details on those and how they're meaningful to the work that we do on our website as well. Before I jump into sharing some of the plans and events for 2024, though, I did just want to briefly touch on why there was a need for AMPA in the first place. And really, this comes down to acceptance and community. Many people hide disability in professional spaces, and it's very understandable why a marginalised group needs to do this. But it does mean that there's a lack of visibility, which has come at the cost of community building and inclusive networking for disabled and neurodivergent library professionals. And this is also indicative of where we lack representation in leadership, which is something that Nikki Anderson spoke on at last year's UL's forum. So this need to address barriers that are being faced, as well as celebrating and really taking pride in this community as well, has defined what AMPA's objectives are. And I've provided a little bit of a summary of them here as well. First and foremost, we are grounded in community. And so we're creating inclusive and accepting spaces to support this. We do realise that this is bigger than just AMPA though. So we're focused on strengthening representation, enabling understanding and acceptance, and also aspiring to see greater support around careers and leadership for disabled and neurodivergent people in glamour sectors. And this is because this is important because it does tie into how we choose to develop, lead, support, mentor, and actually coach library professionals as well. For example, we find that a lot of traditional models of coaching aren't always effective for many people in this community, or they may experience microaggressions or ableism when accessing some of these professional development or networking opportunities. And because of that lack of representation that Nikki and I have both mentioned at various points, many of these barriers that are experienced just go completely missed. And so this is where AMPA really comes in aiming to address some of these challenges and the gaps while providing opportunities for connection. And we're really excited just to be seeing such an active sense of allyship forming around this as well. And that's so important to the work that we're doing. Next slide, thank you. So looking at what we've done so far, stepping into 2024, we've grown very quickly in our first 3 to 4 months with over 80 members. And we have a lot of engagement and events planned for across the year. And I just want to take a moment as well to say thank you to our volunteers and committee members who have done just such an incredible job at actually bringing this together. At the moment, our 2 biggest and ongoing events are our community catch-ups and our webinar series, which alternate each month. So we're kicking off our first catch-up for 2024 next week with the topic Dream Big and the prompt, what does a dream disability workplace and profession look like to you? So that's a bit of a facilitated conversation and a chance for people to connect on a bi-monthly basis. Then in March, we have the first in our webinar series for the year, which is open to all of our members. And that's with Claire O'Dwyer, who's speaking on her career journey as an autistic library director. And Claire's taking a very strengths-based approach to this presentation, which actually reflects our value of pride really well. So it certainly doesn't ignore the challenges that are faced along the way or the lessons that are learned in that process, but it does celebrate the strengths that are being brought. And for Claire, that's in a leadership position as well. And these webinar and community catch-up programs are then complemented by various other resources and communications. So we have our podcast that we launched last year, and that will be continuing throughout 2024 as well. We have a Discord server for full members to share resources and connect between community catch-ups. So there's that opportunity to find spaces that people are comfortable actually having conversation in and ensure that our catch-ups as well, we can facilitate different models of communication and make it an accessible space. And lastly, we have our monthly newsletter, which is highlighting any new events, developments, as well as resources as they arise. And while it is very early days for AMPA, we've already seen this have just such a positive impact in actually bringing people together and kicking off conversations around this. Next slide, thank you. So we've got contact details here, so you can find more information about AMPA via our website or by emailing any of our committee members. And links to our social media accounts are also on the website. AMPA membership is open to all glamour professionals, and we welcome anyone who is interested in being part of this community, supporting this community, or just being part of the conversation and learning to join. So thank you very much, and thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, Emilia. And yeah, I just wanted to thank you and Nikki for your fantastic leadership in this space, and also to your volunteers and your committee members. And I look really forward to proceeding the great work that you'll be doing. So I can see that there's information in the chat, and we've also got information there about. So thanks so much. Right, well, that brings me to the end of the first part of the session. We've still got plenty more to come, and I'd like now to hand over to Claire Thorpe, who's the Director of Library Services, Southern Cross University, to take us through the next part of the session. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Nicole. So for those of you who were with us last year, we did this. This is essentially the break in between the first and second hours of today's forum. So it's your opportunity to take a comfort break, grab a cuppa, or you're very welcome to stay online. I've got 2 short activities for you on Slido. So if you've got your device out, you can quickly scan the code, or you can use the link that I've popped in the chat. And I think Michael's going to stop sharing the screen so that I can pop the first Slido quiz up. And the first question that we have today that I would love for you to answer is, which QULOC director or university librarian has been in their job the longest? Now, this is based on data that I've gathered from people's LinkedIn profiles as of December 2023. Now, you should be able to see everyone's name on the Slido screen. You may need to scroll down, but jump on in and vote for who you think is the longest serving QULOC director. Sorry, I should have had some music to play at this point. We'll just give you a minute to pop some votes in. So people can access it. Oh, it's voting closed. Oh, okay. Bear with me a second. Talk amongst yourself while I stop sharing the screen and change my settings. Why has it closed? Reset. Can someone try again and let me know in the chat if it's working?
Still closed.
Okay, no problems. We can do it by chat. So hopefully you know everyone's name, but if you don't, I'll read them out slowly and I'll get you to pop in the chat who you think it might be. So our QULOC directors are Kate Elder at Charles Darwin University, Anita Brown at Central Queensland, Helen Hooper, at James Cook, Blanca Pisani, who was at UNE, Sarah Fredline from Bond, Caroline Williams from University of Queensland, Maureen Sullivan at Griffith, Nicole Clark at QT, Janet Fletcher at Australian Catholic University, and Carlo Iacano at Charles Sturt, and of course myself at Southern Cross. So we've got some votes coming through, quite a few people voting for Maureen, Helen, a couple of votes for Carmel, Nicole, Sarah. Maureen seems to be a very popular choice. Jodie thinks it's me. Well, the correct answer, let me just check my cheat sheet. The correct answer is Carmel O'Sullivan, who joined University of Southern Queensland in 2015. Maureen is our second longest serving. She joined Griffith in 2016 in that role, and a few others from there. So the second question I was going to ask in my little quiz that's not working was, who is the most recently appointed to their role? And remember, this was at December 2023, so you can rule out Blanca. It's Got 1 vote for Carlo and lots of votes for Kate so far. Janet. Any last advances? It seems to be a bit of a tie so far between Janet, Kate and Carlo. Well, based on my very scientific LinkedIn and call email research, I think the correct answer is Kate Elder. And the reason for that is Kate was acting in the role for most of 2023, but was recently appointed formally as the director of Charles Darwin University. We're very grateful to have Kate as part of QULOC and congratulate her on that appointment. And of course, that was at the end of last year when I designed this quiz and we were planning. But of course, Blanca has recently been announced as a new University Librarian at Sunshine Coast. So if you thought, would have accepted Blanca, but as I said, was working on my data. Michael, do you want to share the slides again? Because I think we can do the next activity using the PowerPoint slide and the chat. So we've got 2 more minutes before we start the next session. So for those of you who love watching things like Letters and Numbers or 8 out of 10 Cats Do Countdowns, you'll be familiar with this type of activity. This is an anagrams game. On screen, you can see the acronyms and names of all of the QULOC members. And if you'd like to, see what words you can come up with. And if someone manages to come up with a really good long one, I might even see if we can find a little QULOC type prize to send you. So take a few minutes. We'll wrap this up in about 1.5 minutes. So have a go at coming up with a word using the names of the QULOC members. There's some very clever people. Annette's come up with 2 words, which as a phrase. Oh my goodness. So some very clever people. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy watching the words come up on screen. We'll do this for 60 more seconds. Hopefully people who have taken a break will be coming back and joining us shortly. I think Kylie McMartin has the longest word so far, but I might have to go back and look at the chat after the session and try and find out who our winner was. And Sam, absolutely correct. I think there are some very expert crossword and anagram people in the room today. So I hope that gave your brains a little bit of a creative break and also learned a little bit more about the QULOC University Librarians. So we're going to move into the second part of today's session. So Michael, I don't know what's that. There we go. This morning, we've already heard from the leaders of our communities of practice and working groups. What we'd like to do in this second session is give you the opportunity to hear from some of our university librarians. And as has already been mentioned at last year's UL Forum, we heard 6 provocations from QULOC library staff members who were challenged to deliver a vision of what they'd like to see in the future. And they delivered us a range of ideas around disability, visibility and representation in leadership, values-based procurement, culturally safe physical and digital spaces, courageous and diverse recruitment strategies, co-creation and inclusive engagement with the voices of the communities that we serve. Now, the University Librarians actually took those provocations, and we've been discussing them throughout 2023, and we've talked about how do we respond to those challenges and those visions that were posed to us 12 months ago. Because there were some really clear call to actions that have challenged us as leaders to really think about the way that we model leadership, the way that we put leadership into action, and the cultures that we create in our QULOC libraries. So today we've invited 4 of our university librarians to share a story about values-based leadership and how they demonstrate and have lived experience of that in their work. So our first presentation today is from Maureen Sullivan from Griffith. Maureen wasn't able to join us in person and has pre-recorded her story to share with us. So Michael, I'll get you to share that, please.
Hello, my name is Maureen Sullivan and I'm the University Librarian at Griffith University. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land. Today I am recording this at the Nathan campus on the unceded lands of the Yuggabal and Turrbal people. I acknowledge their long stewardship and care of the beautiful environment on which I have the privilege to work. Griffith prides itself on being a values-driven organisation. It is something that attracted me and keeps me at Griffith University, an alignment of my values. Griffith lives the values with deliberate purpose, and they are transformative, not just performative. Our values are not just a tick box activity. So, my story. In 2021, the library acquired a digital screen and set it up in the Nathan Campus Library with the intention of promoting the Griffith Archive, especially through our historical video collection. Our conversations revolved around suitable content and a passionate discussion about showing more than old white men being important, a paraphrase of course. So we decided to look for content featuring women. Our archive officer, Michael, found a video of Germaine Greer when she was given an honorary doctorate in 1996. The footage was in good condition, the story solid, her speech acknowledged First Peoples, and she made reference to how her Griffith ceremonial gown reflected the Aboriginal flag, red, black and yellow. Black for the people, yellow for the sun, and red for the earth. As a 1970s baby feminist, Germaine Greer was an icon to me, and while I was aware she had controversial opinions on gender, I judged that the footage and the reconciliation focus was historical and relevant. It was, if you like, of its time. Some staff raised concerns, which to my regret, I minimised. We decided to go ahead with a soft launch, and this was not my finest hour. Within hours, we had received polite but strong pushback from Griffith's Rainbow Society. And I quote, "I am emailing you today because I feel we should not stand by and let Griffith University celebrate this bigot and apologist of sexual assault, especially in the light of current transphobic campaigns in the USA and the UK." Unquote. So my values, my alignment with Griffith community values, my leadership and my judgment were all challenged and rightly found wanting. We immediately replaced the video with student videos from the Griffith Film School and reached out to the complainant and to the community. We organised a meeting, which for me was an opportunity to apologise face to face and to build some bridges and regain trust. My second values sense check was that come to a meeting in the library with the library management was perceived as we are in trouble. The power imbalance and honestly the entitlement of us wanting them to meet on our terms, in our space and in our format hit me like a ton of bricks when the student rep called to nervously outline their concerns about the meeting. Another fail at values-driven leadership. We did go ahead with the meeting, with a few people from the Rainbow Society and the Student Representative Council, and a reduced number, only 3, of library staff. It was, in the end, a genuinely fruitful conversation and did forge positive relationships. So, what did I learn? I learnt that values are not a set and forget. I learnt that they need constant nurturing, testing, and evolution. I learnt that you should listen to your staff and to your students, and you should give them a real voice and meet them where they are. That values-driven leadership is hard, that you make mistakes, that it requires diligence, reflection, and compassion, even to yourself. The only bad thing about making a mistake is not learning from that mistake. So we will have similar challenging navigations with reconciliation, truth-telling, and any path to treaty, as Sir Samuel Griffith, after whom our university is named, played a complex and troubling role in early white settlement, politics, and law impacting Indigenous people. I hope to have learnt from my mistakes and to do better values-based leadership in this fraught context. So thank you very much for your time and enjoy the forum.
Thank you, Michael, for playing that for us, and to Maureen for sharing that very vulnerable story. Our next speaker is Anita Brown from Central Queensland University. And if you do have comments or questions for the speakers, please feel free to add them in the chat as we go along.
Thanks very much, Claire. Wow, that is a really tough act to follow. This is the independent films edition of my reflection on values, not the polished Hollywood version. ChatGPT and I have had quite the dialogue over the past few weeks about how personal values underpin leadership style. And so I guess I'm going to share a very personal reflection broadly based on that. I was thinking about the core values that have always driven me right throughout my career, from my days as a university student right now to as Associate Director of SEEK University Library. And of course, those values are shaped by the environment I grew up in and the experiences I've had. So 4 values for me would be: work hard, learn from your mistakes, take responsibility, and act with integrity. So then I spent some time reflecting, how do those 4 values impact my leadership style, and thinking about both the positive and negative impacts. Because I guess I want to call out that as a leader, reflection is absolutely key. We're always trying to improve, refine, and develop our skills. So as a leader, my personal value of work hard means that I set really high expectations for my team. Strategic plans are ambitious. They require stretch from all our members. So on a positive, that fosters continuous improvement and learning, but without care, I need to be very aware that ambitious goals could impact team morale if we don't quite meet them, or if we aren't quite flexible enough to adapt and reposition when circumstances change. What about mistakes? We all make them. And Maureen's just shared a very personal and wide-reaching mistake. Building a culture where mistakes are a learning opportunity can absolutely foster innovation and growth. I think sometimes when we take the time to reflect on what hasn't gone well, we can certainly, with the benefit of hindsight, learn how we might do things differently or how we might do things better the next time. But what that can also inadvertently create is a fear of failure amongst the team. And at its worst, that's really going to hinder the very culture I'm trying to build as a leader. So what about responsibility? I'm a really big advocate for personal responsibility. Throughout, I'm sure you'd all be aware, throughout all your careers, nobody hands you your dream job. No one hands you your dream project. you take responsibilities for the actions you take to get there. But when I'm thinking about encouraging responsibility in my team, my role as a leader is to ensure that the appropriate support processes and mechanisms are in place. So, you know, are we delegating appropriately? Are we setting really clear expectations? Are we allowing staff to go and explore and come back and discuss possible ways of moving forward? Those who know me really well will recognise that my strong commitment to integrity often leads to some really blunt communication. And whilst honesty is important, there are certainly ways a good leader can deliver feedback in a way that facilitates effective communication and collaboration. So, you know, at my best, I get that right. You know, I'm watching and carefully considering the feelings of the person I'm talking to. But certainly at my worst, when I'm under pressure, that communication can be quite brutal. So in sharing that, I guess what I wanted to call out is that, you know, and Maureen alluded to this, being a leader is not an easy job. We're human too. Sometimes we get things right. Quite often there's room for improvement. But, you know, my takeaway is that leadership is a continuous journey. Along the way, I'm always learning, adapting, adding new tools and techniques to my toolkit. So at the very heart of my leadership is the desire to be the best I can be and to support and coach others around me to be the same. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Anita. I'm going to avoid commenting or editorialising and just invite our next speaker to the screen, Carmel O'Sullivan from University of Southern Queensland, our longest serving QULOC University Librarian. Thanks, Carmel.
How scary is that to be the longest serving? I was convinced it was Maureen, but that's because of her great leadership and stature. I feel like a newbie. So hi everyone, and Budgery Janan from Guyabal, Jarrawa and Waka Waka lands in the Toowoomba region. I am lucky enough to be living and working very close to where I grew up, which was on unceded Guyabal land just south of Toowoomba. So thank you to Maureen and Anita for their very thoughtful reflections, both the cinematic reflection and the indie movie reflection. So for my contribution, I wanted to try and bring a perspective on values-based leadership that acknowledges that in fact every one of us is striving to live and work in line with our values. So we might be able to talk about values-based leadership, partly at least because when you are a leader in an organisation, you're afforded the space to articulate your values more and to make decisions that impact other people to a greater extent. And therefore, we do have a responsibility to reflect on whether and how we manifest our values in our work. But all of us are actually doing that, just with differing amounts of situational power. So we all try to live and work according to our values, whether we have really looked at our behaviours and decisions with that lens or not. And our values do, of course, evolve over time, and they're influenced by our background and our experiences and by people who've influenced us. So for me, for instance, growing up on a farm in a large family in the 70s and 80s when interest rates sent farmers to the brink, it means that I value having a job. And I grew up with a mother who valued education and women being independent, and she emphasised that all of her daughters needed to have the skills to enable them to support themselves. So her experience, so beyond the age of 13, she could only be educated if she got scholarships and did it herself. Her mother was a single mother with 4 children. Her husband had died when her children were 5, 3 and twin 9-month-old baby boys. And she was like, I'm done at 13. You look after yourself after that. So mum became a teacher. She was paid 75% of the male wage. She raised a family, and then she went back to university in her 40s, actually at this university that I am at now, after having 11 children, and then she worked till she was 72 years old. And that has really definitely influenced my career decisions and my personal decisions. So I have always worked, and I have always assumed that I would be able to support my family myself. And having lived my teenage years acutely aware of our precarious financial position, I would also never, ever leave a job with no other job lined up. I would take a job that isn't perfect rather than risk waiting for one that is. And I have, in fact, several times taken jobs that might have been seen as backward steps in terms of hierarchy, but which allowed to keep my family together and stay in the workforce. So I've preferred to have a job and work my way back up to where I was than have any break in my career. Other people live their values by making bolder choices than I feel comfortable making. So it doesn't mean that I don't have values. It's just that underlying some of my decisions is a certain amount of fear, and it's those values that I inherited from my upbringing that are influencing the decisions that I make even now. And we're all doing versions of this, often unknowingly making decisions based on fears or mantras that we've taken on board early in life and possibly never particularly questioned. So in my career, there have been a few times where my internalised values have bumped up against a situation that causes me physical or emotional stress. And most of the time, that exact situation has not caused all of my colleagues to have the same type of stress. And that's because our values are slightly different, and maybe they're more resilient, or maybe they have other values that take precedent over whatever it is that I'm tightly holding on to. And so there are lots of options available to you in that situation. For me, clearly, I would never just resign because I value security, but I can, and I have once looked for a different job and just removed myself from the situation. That was difficult for me, but not difficult for all of my peers who just experienced it differently. So learning not to judge myself or my peers for simply reacting to a situation differently has been a really useful lesson for me. So equally, in my career, I've had to reflect about a situation, figure out what I can do and what I can't control, and then set about step by step doing what it's possible for me to do to better align with how I prefer to work and how I prefer to lead a team. So asking what is the next right thing to do and doing it is a mantra that has made sense for me in my career. And there is often a tension between what you're able to do, what you must do, what's the hard thing in the short term, but the right thing in the long term, what's right for the collective, but hard for individuals. Lots of the ways that we navigate those tensions is about how our own values influence what we think is the right approach. And as Maureen noted, we do notice the values of our organisation and how that makes us feel about working for an organisation that espouses particular values. For us in higher education, it's pretty easy to find organisational values in all of our institutions that align with our professional values and most likely with our personal values. But lots of people work in organisations that might seem to be more commercial, more profit-based, but which can very much provide an environment that aligns to values around learning and community and safety and creativity, or whatever it is that your values might be. It is definitely stressful to work in an environment that either fundamentally doesn't suit you well or in which a particular circumstances doesn't sit well with you, but it's also possible to find places that do allow you to live your values in most organisations. So for example, I spent about 10 years working in a top-tier law firm. So on the surface, that seems a bit misaligned with who I am. And I do remember thinking, wow, we have the fanciest offices. We recruit the best young law graduates. We have the best librarians, obviously. And all of that money and intellect and talent goes to working for mining companies and other big organisations that also have the fanciest offices, the most money to throw at a problem, the best graduates, etc. But when I worked there, I also absolutely loved being the person who made, in some small way, the lives of those new graduates who were billing every 6 minutes and working crazy hours and scared of failing a little bit easier. So I was able to find the human, personal connection with the people that I worked with in that situation. So I made great friends there. Some of my best friends are lawyers. And I feel that I was able to create a really collaborative team and help our graduates in particular do better in a really stressful environment. In other places that I've worked that on the face of it align better to my personal values, there have also been things about that organisation or about ways that peers worked that I've had to kind of navigate my way through because some aspects of it didn't align with my personal values. I think there's a tendency also to think that values-based leadership or values-based anything is about what the collective thinks is a good or an altruistic value, but two people's values may be really opposite without one being good and the other being bad. So for instance, you might value order and certainty over creativity and innovation. And both of these are really solid and valid values, and both of them can lead to a team or an organisation that thrives. Valuing fun and a social atmosphere over productivity and efficiency. Again, neither is a better value. We all bring our own bias to how we view a particular way of working. So when we say that we're practicing values-based leadership or values-based work, the first thing to do is to figure out what your own values are and how you can authentically work with those values being respected. And reflective practice is a really useful way to get insight into your values-based work behaviours. Both Maureen and Anita have talked about the importance of reflection. So if we're regularly reflecting on things that happen at work and how we feel about them and what we might learn from them, then we do get more in tune with our values and how the environment we are in does or doesn't support our personal values. And we're often quite an internally focused and intellectual profession, so we tend to put things in the abstract. And sometimes being able to figure out from how you feel physically can lead to you to figure out where your values might be bumping up against something that clashes. So that one example where I actually did leave an organisation for a different job is one where I felt physically ill because I was being required to do things that didn't align with my values, and I felt that I didn't have any ability to influence the situation. And looking back, there was genuinely an issue with that environment, and the organisation was already investigating it when I left. But my reaction was not the only way to deal with that situation, and it was completely valid for other people to have other ways of negotiating that set of circumstances. So lastly, what I wanted to reflect on is that it's a privilege to be able to pick and choose where and how you work, and it's a definite privilege to be in a position where your own personal values can be articulated to a whole team and treated with respect. And so we work with a lot of people who bring all different experiences and backgrounds and values to our teams. So finding ways to acknowledge the inevitable diversity of approaches within a team and at the same time leading in a way that's authentic to you can really be challenging at times. And libraries aren't neutral spaces, and we aren't neutral leaders, and none of us work in agnostic or value-free ways. So to conclude, we are all working in values-based organisations, and we're all bringing our own values to work. We're heavily influenced by our own background and experiences. We can find ways and places of working that align with our values in a wide variety of situations. And reflective practice is a great way for leaders to continuously interrogate their own behaviours and values and how they impact people around them and how they're able to influence their environment. So thank you.
Thank you, Carmel. We have one more speaker this morning. So our newest QULOC member, Charles Sturt University, I'd like to invite Carlo Acno to the screen. And Anita and Carmel, there is a question in the chat from Yanti, which I might invite you to consider while Carlo's speaking. Thank you.
Anita, do you want to answer that or do you want me to answer it? So
have we got Carlo online to speak first? Sorry, I can't see the participants at the moment, so I'm going to defer to... No, okay, Michael says can't see Carlo online, so so shame we can't hear from him this morning. But yeah, Anita or Carmel, so Yandi's asked the question. So there was a comment from Susan first up that said it's very hard when your values do not align with the organisational values. It's much easier the other way around. So Yanti has asked in response, how do you navigate an environment when your values do not align? with organisational values. And I know, Carmel, you did allude to this, but Anita, do you want to comment first, perhaps?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. And yeah, look, I listened carefully to what Carmel had to say on this, because yeah, it is really, really difficult when your values don't align and you're bumping up all the time with a bit of friction. I was reflecting on part of this in thinking about what I talk about today, because as many of you know, at CQ University, the library is part of our digital services, our IT directorate, and has been for 11 years. And I've really struggled to understand what that point of misfit is, and why it's a very difficult environment for the library to lead in and operate in. And for me, it comes down to a slight mismatch of values, and picking up what Carmel says, it's not that one value is better or worse than the others. It's just that the values that drive those two aspects of the business are quite different. So, you know, on one sense, IT values, you know, speed of delivery, you know, short agile project delivery, you know, implementing a system as a solution. Whereas for the library, you know, we value relationship building via iterative interactions with our customers. We value probably a slower pace of continuous improvement, and we probably value more a more considered and evidence-based response to you know, a minimal viable product sort of response. So, you know, how do I work within that environment? I guess, you know, how do I deal with that tension? I have to dial up my communication. I have to dial up my self-awareness, and I have to dial up my ability at times, I guess, to be a little humble and to think a little bit more about different perspectives that are being put on the table. Does that prevent me from railing and gnashing my teeth? Not necessarily, but I guess what it's doing is, in the cheesiest sense, challenging me to grow as a leader, to try to find different ways to work together. So that's probably how I'd unpack that one.
Thanks, Anita. I think that's a really great example of comparing the way perhaps that we, or the things that we value in libraries with our colleagues in the IT and technology spaces. Carmel, did you want to respond to the question about how you've navigated environments when you've had that values mismatch?
Yeah, and I think, so I don't think there's any organisation who just values being mean. Like, no organisation has a value that's just horrid. So, and every organisation thinks that they're working, you know, in a really positive way. So, and I think Anita's example is really good, where you value speed of delivery over the process of collaborating with people and getting to a result that's kind of meaningful. And so those kind of ways of working can rub people up the wrong way. But kind of what I think about is what is in your control and what is out of your control. So what's in your control is your reaction and how upset you get. So when I was really unhappy in that organisation that I left, I let myself get very upset, and I let myself really kind of just sink into the feeling unhappy about everything. Probably not very mature. But you do control how upset you get, what your reaction is. You control whether you apply for another job or not. You control how you speak to your team, how you support your team, whether you gossip and rail against things or whether you find positive things to do. So you control kind of that, the narrative that you tell yourself about the circumstance you're in. But what's out of your control is how people, you know, what deadlines people give you, how other people behave, that kind of stuff. So I figure that there's all different ways to respond to that, so you can kind of find the bits of the value of that organisation that do align with you. You can find the ways to work with your team that make you feel good and make your team feel good. And then you can just go, actually, when I've weighed all these things up, this is not good for me. And so I'm going to make a different decision. And, you know, for me, that's never going to be leave in a huff. That's going to be find the next thing that is paying me money and making me secure, and go for that and put up with it while I'm waiting. So you don't have to stay, but you can choose to stay and do really good things in many different environments. But also, if it's really horrid, then you can still choose. You don't have to stay for, to make yourself unhappy just for an organisation. Life's a bit bigger than that.
Yeah, I agree, Carmel, and I think that's where, for me, that personal responsibility comes in, because you do have to take ownership of any decisions or actions that you make in that space, lining up, as you said, where your values fit, but also lining up, where your purpose is. So, back to that IT library, both business areas have really solid purposes that they're contributing to the university. It's just that the way we're doing it is quite different. So absolutely, for me, it is about I'm responsible for how I navigate that environment. I'm responsible for how I set the tone with the team about how we navigate that environment, and for finding ways that we can work together and leverage the benefits of that quite different relationship. And I think that comes back to what we were talking about earlier around no values better or worse than anything else. And if you remain open, I think, to being aware of what's driving other people, and accommodating within your comfort level, I think you're a better leader for it.
I've got one last question without notice, apologies. But I'd really love to give our colleagues, I guess, a bit of a practical takeaway today. And both of you have spoken about the importance of reflective practice and coming to a place where you've actually able to really clearly articulate your own personal values today. I wonder if maybe you could give us some ideas about, if someone doesn't really know what their values are or they can't articulate them clearly, what are some things that maybe they could do or they could work through to help them identify their values? And while you're thinking about that, Anita, you've just referred to the fact that, there's no necessarily good or better values. And I know for those of you who have read Brené Brown's Dare to Lead book, there's a fantastic list of values in there and an exercise that you can go through to help you define your values. But do either of you, can you talk a little bit about the process you've gone through to being able to, I guess, really identify those values that you've either brought from childhood or align with your own intuition and physical experiences, or perhaps just through iterative reflective practice in your career?
I think you just, I don't think I've spent my entire career kind of reflecting on values necessarily. I think circumstances have come up and you've gone, why does that feel uncomfortable? Or why am I choosing this? Or why am I proud of this? But I do think that a thing that really works well for me is to have this weekly, I just write down, and I think I got it from some podcast, but I write down kind of what my goal for the week is and what the things that I'm going to do in my kind of personal life admin, socially, work-related, and kind of health, wellness kind of related, and just to get that balance of like, what am I looking for from the week? What are kind of the priorities in those 4 different areas so that you still have balance, and then just kind of reflecting on what happened last week and what you want to do this week. And then that's pretty micro, I guess. It's looking very narrowly about the week, but I think that also lets you realize where you're getting out of alignment with what feels good to you. And it also lets you reflect, and some you reflect on the big things that happen, like why did I leave that job, or why did I feel so bad about that interaction, but also you reflect on why did I love this job, or why am I getting so much out of doing these things? And so the big things that happen in your life, you do a big reflection on, if I look at my life as this big pattern, why have I loved these types of jobs? Why have I navigated and towards these types of activities? But then also, if you just build in that little bit of reflection every week, some people might do it every day, but at least you're then kind of just sense checking all the time about, I liked that, I didn't like that, I reacted badly to that, I reacted well to that, I wouldn't do that again, how I would navigate that conversation again, I guess a little bit of reflective practice.
Yeah, I would agree, Carmel. That's a really tough question, Claire. I certainly take a very different approach to Carmel, much less structured in the reflection process. But I guess for as long as I can remember, I've been my own harshest critic. So there's this inbuilt inner voice that's always analysing and reviewing what I've either done or what I've achieved, and it's probably only more in latter years that I've shifted that reflection from, self-awareness of, what are my key traits and, how am I operating as a leader, to more trying to think about what sits under that, what really are those innate key motivators. And they don't need to have fancy labels, I don't think. Like it really is just thinking about, as Carmel said, well, why did I do that? Why did it make me feel good? Why did it make me feel bad? And it may be, something that is very hard to relate to the fact, well, actually, that's a value. But I think you need to understand what your own personal drivers are. And that then helps you, I think, position as a leader. But if I had one piece of advice, that, I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of work around leadership reflective practice. And for me, it's that really simple analogy of holding the mirror up, and do that regularly in terms of hold the mirror up in front of you and what are you seeing? More importantly, what are other people seeing? And are you comfortable with that, or are there things that you want to change?
Thank you both, and also thank you to Maureen in absentia for being vulnerable and courageous today, and sharing some very personal stories about how you live out values in your leadership. I know I've certainly learned a lot, and I did work for Carmel for a number of years, so I would have thought I would have heard all her stories, but there was some fantastic learnings for me there as well. I know we've had a couple of questions that's come in the last minute. However, I'm going to wrap it up in being wary of the time and valuing the time of everyone online today. So please join me in virtually thanking Anita, Carmel and Maureen, and I'll welcome Janet Fletcher to the screen to wrap up today's session.
Thank you, Claire. I'm joining you from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people. I work from Banyo campus in Brisbane. I must admit, it was 2 hours that just flew by. Often you might sit here watching online and thinking about other things, but I was totally transfixed about what everybody was talking about. Last year, I had to sum up a seminar at University Sydney about, and it was a seminar around incorporating Indigenous meaning into library design. And I had prepared a a wonderful summary, and about 1/3 of the way through burst into tears and ended up being a blubbering mess because it was such an emotional day that I just couldn't believe it. So now I'm getting like it today, because when I reflect on the two parts of this forum, the similarities across them all. So when I think about the first part, it was Emilia sort of talked about bringing people together and ensuring that we bring everyone together, which is really what ANPA is about, is making sure that those who do not get heard get heard. And then when you think about the work of our QULOC communities of practice and our practitioner groups, that is about bringing people together as well. And thank you to Leslie for saying about how face-to-face is so important. I'm quite passionate about that. It's really around when you get face-to-face that you really build that meaning and relationships. And online is a great complementary, but it is important for humans to be together. But our QULOC network, I have only just returned back to QULOC after a 20-year absence. And what I valued about QULOC 20 years ago to what it is now is the same. It's a space for collaboration. It's a safe space to learn and to get involved and be vulnerable, which is what we heard from my University Librarian colleagues. I love the conveners. They show such great leadership, generosity, and humour as well comes through. It's not just about the tasks, it's about the people behind those tasks. And it's a great way, the QULOC is very much around collaboration and interconnectedness and being non-judgmental and just giving things a go. And I think the fact that we've got so many people attending today shows how that is valued. And so when you see the work that was done in 23 and then you thinking about the work in 24, please do engage. Please, even if it is attending a webinar, that you might feel a little braver to be even more active. And I think that QULOC is quite a magical little group, whatever we want to call it, to enable everyone to be involved in our work. And it was so interesting hearing what people were doing within technology, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, our workforce, and so on. So there's a lot of content there for us to engage with. And then we come to our talking about values-based leadership. And of course, leadership is throughout our organisation. We all can show leadership. And, you know, the talking about where we come from, you know, what our background is, and that idea that our values can be quite different, but they're not necessarily wrong or bad. They're just different, and how you adjust to that and how you reflect on your own values and what you bring to work. And so Carmel's comments about alignment of our values can be a challenge, and knowing where you're coming from and what all your values are really helps you make the right decisions throughout your life. And it's a privilege that you can work within your values. I thought that was a nice way of putting it. And then, of course, Anita and Maureen around being so honest about where they've come and what they are doing and what failure means. And failure's fine. It's all about that reflection and learning from failures and listening and showing compassion and kindness. And Anita was saying that leadership is a continuous journey, and it is. If we all said that we're done and dusted, we wouldn't continue to learn, and how important that is. So I think it's just been a magical morning, and I really am very grateful for everyone's contributions today. And also, these events take a lot of forethought and a lot of organisation. So thank you to Nicole and Claire and Maureen and Michael and everyone else who have put the hard work together for all of us to enjoy and reflect on this morning. So thank you very much. To Nicole?
Well, yeah, I think I'll just say thank you again to all our speakers, and that brings us to the end of the session. So amazing. I'm going away refreshed and energized and inspired. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.